up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Church Neighborhood Podcast. My name's Stephen Wright, joined by Mr. William Monroe. Will, how are you doing, friend?
Steve, I'm doing well. Almost halfway through the week here. I've got a nice midweek off day on Thursday for my birthday, so only got a couple days left of day job work.
Yeah, there you go. That's a nice little break. I know a lot of people don't like having a day off in the middle of the week. I don't mind it. It splits up the week kind of nice.
Yeah, you can kind of get some chores done. Like I'm gonna go, grocery shop and Christmas shopping, get some just stuff done around, and just not have to worry about work on your day off. I always try to get off that day, even if it's not a overly crazy job. It's just something to not have to worry about.
Yeah, it's a good time of the year because, like you said, you just knock out stuff, get it out of the way.
Yeah,
yeah, that's good.
Absolutely. How's everything going in your world? Did you get the winter tires on the car?
I did. It got snow over the weekend, and then it decided to snow all day today. Didn't really stick, but it snowed all day. So, yeah,
we got a couple flurries down here too. I didn't catch many, but a lot of people were posting about a couple flurries here and there.
Yeah, it's definitely started, and unfortunately, here what happens is it snows once, and it's not a lot. We got like 2 inches, I think, this weekend, but the temperature never gets high enough for it to melt, so it's just here permanently, regardless of what happens. Yeah. So it has begun. But yeah, we got start sits going on today. You ready to jump into them?
Yeah, get it going.
Cool. So starting with our quarterback position here, we have Taysom Hill now back in the starter seat versus Dallas, or Carson Wentz at Houston.
This one I think is pretty easy. I like the top upside of Taysom Hill, and I have a claim in on him in the Superflex League, hoping to get him. I've been kind of playing the stream QB option at my second quarterback in that league for a while, so hoping to maybe get him and lock that position down as that's what I hoped Cam Newton was 2 weeks ago. So in the situation like that, I don't mind playing him against Dallas, but first week back, fully back, probably going to be the starter. Dallas is somewhat of a tough defense. I'm going to go Wentz. I think, there is the floor for Wentz being a little lower just because of how bad Houston is against the run, and it could just be a huge JT game. Maybe you don't need a ton of yards out of Wentz. But I still, think the points are going to be in their favor, so maybe he gets an early touchdown or two. And he can scramble a good bit as well. So I'll take Carson Wentz pretty easily here. I just think there's a lower floor there for Hill in his first game back against Dallas.
Yeah, I tend to agree. You don't know what you're going to get. They both got pretty similar upside. Wentz has got the upside because of the good matchup. Hill's got the upside for the rushing ability, the potential for some sort of shootout or at least needing to put up points. So the upside's probably similar, but I agree. The floor for Hill, despite him rushing, you don't really know what it's going to be. You haven't seen him as a starter for a while.
Got to see it first.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm with you. I'll go with Wentz.
Next up, we've got Tua versus the Giants, or Russ Wilson versus the Niners.
This one is, I think, it's pretty difficult, which is weird to say. If you would have mentioned debating this earlier in the season, people would have looked at you funny. We mentioned Tua as a streamer on the waiver show yesterday, and he's a great option. I think I would stick with Russell Wilson, though. I got a feeling, a rivalry matchup against the 49ers is going to bring the best out of him. He did have a good fantasy game. It wasn't great, last week, which is a nice step in the right direction. So I will take Wilson, and I just as a rolling the dice on a nice Seattle bounce back here. And it's probably not the right decision to make, but that's what I'm doing. What are you going with?
This one's tough. It's almost similar to the Hill situation where I don't want to play Russell Wilson until I see it because he has not looked good these past few weeks. I saw someone say, the diagnosis was a 6-week injury, and if you're a DK Metcalf owner, you pretty much feel like Russell Wilson has been out for 6 weeks because he has been not there. Even Tyler Lockett had a good game because of a couple big catches, but you're not seeing that volume in the receiving core that you want out of this Russell Wilson. And, I think, sure, there's a chance that this game, is just a big divisional game, brings it out in him, but the Niners defense is pretty tough. So until I see it with Russ, I don't think I can play him. I'm going to go Tua, who's been looking good, and I think there's a chance he gets Parker back, but Waddle's looked really good. I just think I trust Tua against the Giants here. It's crazy to say, but I would play Tua.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Can't argue with that. Our last quarterback question here, Dak Prescott at New Orleans or Matthew Stafford versus the Jaguars?
Yeah, and Dak is somewhat hampered with some of the weapons. We don't know if Zeke's going to play. There's talks that he may rest him. Seems like Lamb is back, but Amari is very questionable with lingering symptoms. So if you're down Amari and Zeke, you could still, make things happen. But it definitely makes it a little closer for me because I think Dak, with full complement of weapons, I would trust Dak over Stafford. Both kind of, defenses that are okay. We've seen New Orleans really good. Then we've seen them give up a lot. The Jags have had a couple good games, but aren't a great defense. I think it's really tight. I lean Stafford, but I think it really comes down to if he's going to have all his weapons for Dak. Like if he has everyone or most of them there, I'd probably go with him. With this being a little bit closer, and the Rams kind of getting into shape with a couple of these new roles for a couple of wide receivers there, I think I would go Stafford here, but good problem to have with these two quarterbacks.
It is, and Stafford was my original pick too. But then looking into it, and this I think is going to surprise you, the Jags have given up the 8th fewest points to quarterbacks in fantasy. And I don't know if that's one of those situations where like the running defense is so bad you just don't need to pass the ball, or what? Because the running defense isn't good. But that surprised me a little bit. So I was going to pick him because the matchup looked great, but apparently it's not. And, like you said, it's a good problem to have. They're really close, and I guess that will sway me the other way. I'll go with Dak. There are definitely concerns you need to watch out because, they had some COVID cases pop up. Pay attention to who is going to be out for this team. If they got a lot of people out, then I'll pivot to Stafford.
Yeah.
If it is a situation where they're just missing Lamb, I think they're leaning on Zeke playing. I think that's the latest I heard. That's the lean right now. Got to wait for a decision.
I thought it was the other side. I think Lamb's back, but Amari looks.
Yeah, you're right.
Down.
Yeah,
and then Zeke is. They're talking about resting him. I mean, who knows? Maybe they just need to get a win. But and Pollard is fine too. I mean, if you don't have Dak,
Pollard
you can go, or don't have Zeke, you can go all out with Pollard. I'm fine with that. It's not like it's a crazy downgrade for Dak not having any run game.
Yeah, Pollard's solid. But yeah, you're right. Lamb's been practicing. I don't know if I guess he's a clear concussion protocol. He'll be fine regardless. He's practicing. Cooper not looking so great. So I'll stick with Dak. If he's missing a lot of people in that offense, I'll pivot. But for now, I'll stick with Dak here.
Awesome. Next up, we've got Boston Scott. I guess moving to running backs, PPR. Boston Scott at the Jets. So is that Sony Michel, I believe, at versus Jacksonville. We've got D. Williams versus Denver. Which Williams is that?
That'd be Daryl.
Daryl?
Yeah.
Daryl for KC, yeah. And then Kenyon Drake versus Washington.
I forgot about Damian Williams. Is he hurt?
Yeah.
Is he?
I think he's in Chicago.
Is he
I know
playing?
He left.
I
haven't seen him play,
yeah,
but I remember seeing him end up in Chicago.
Yeah, he's definitely
He must be hurt. Or maybe he sat out for COVID last year, right? Yeah, I don't know.
He was out this week. He hasn't played since week 8. I just looked it up. Yeah, and then week 7 he didn't do anything. Week 6 he didn't do anything. He had 2 good weeks. So I thought I remember hearing his name, and then he just disappeared. So he's out there. He's just hurt. Anyway, irrelevant. Daryl Williams, I'll easily knock out here. CEH, was back in their last game and looked good, and Daryl Williams didn't get a ton of work. So I will scratch him off. Drake is also probably another one that I can drop out. I mean, he had those couple weeks a little while ago after Gruden got fired where he had a lot of work, but the past 2 or 3 weeks he hasn't really done anything. So those two I'll take out. It's between, Sony and Scott. It's pretty simple for me. We still don't know what's going to happen with Henderson, if he's going to miss or not. If Henderson plays, I'll start Boston Scott. And if Henderson doesn't play, I'll probably stick with Sony Michel against that Jacksonville defense that we just said is not good against the run. What about you?
Yeah, I mean the injury definitely is a concern, or ahead of Sony Michel would be a big differentiator here. And obviously there's some injury to play out with the Philly backfield, but Boston Scott looked good even as kind of the number 2 last week, and they want to run the ball a ton. So while Sony is interesting, especially if we do have an injury ahead of him, I think all things being equal, Boston Scott's the play for me. Do we know the game times? And I think the Eagles play at 1. We know if the Rams and Jacksonville is a 1:00 game as well.
I don't think so, because that game is in Jacksonville is away. So it's going to be in LA. So I can't see that being 1 o'clock.
Yeah. So, I mean, just because we don't, I mean, maybe you'll find out ahead of time, but all things being equal, I'll go Boston Scott.
That is fair. Next one up, half point PPR, Josh Jacobs versus Washington. The other side, that Drake backfield, and then Saquon Barkley at Miami.
I don't know if you saw news just earlier today, but there is word that Daniel Jones may not play with a neck injury. So I saw that. That I think is a little more worrisome and even more enticing for Miami's defense. But I think if he's out, that definitely puts a big hindrance on Barkley. I mean, maybe you get a lot of checkdowns, but and the Washington defense has been playing better as well. I lean Jacobs here. Barkley probably has like the higher upside, can break a bunch of more plays, but I think Jacobs is going to get the volume. So I would lean him here, especially with the concern for injury there in New York with the quarterback.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm going to go with Jacobs. Both run defenses are actually pretty good, but Miami's, from a fantasy perspective, is better than Washington. So, yeah, I'll stick with Jacobs. We'll see what happens with Daniel Jones. They're definitely concerned to the point where they elevated Jake Fromm up from the practice squad, the name that I had forgotten about. But he was out there. So definitely some concern, and yeah, they'll definitely be facing some stack boxes if Daniel Jones doesn't play. So I will stick with Jacobs as well. I agree.
All right. Next up here, we've got a half point PPR. It's a full point PPR. Alexander Madison at Detroit and James Conner at Chicago.
This is tough. I'm assuming, have they officially ruled out Cook?
I don't believe so. I think all indications look like he's going to miss a game, but I don't think it's been officially ruled yet. So
I guess here we'll assume that he's not playing. Because if he is playing, I must start Madison. But assuming he's not, it's pretty tight. I mean, Madison has been good when he's been the starter. He's got a good matchup against Detroit. But Connor's been hot all year. In a high-powered offense coming off a bye week, that's real nice. It's hard to pass up, but I think I would go with Madison. Kind of hesitantly. It's really hard to look at Connor, what he's done all this year, and then bench him. But, Madsen's got that smash max up. He should have the backfield all to himself. So I will stick with Madsen here. What do you think?
I think I lean Connor, just the way he's been playing. The matchup definitely leans in Madison's way. And as you said, if somehow Cook is playing, even if he is playing, Madison still probably gets bulk of the work with the injury. But if it's all Madison, that's when this becomes like a conversation. Whereas if not, I think it's easy. But I mean, Connor has just been the guy there. He's been getting all of the touches for running back touches in the red zone. Obviously, Kyler can always snipe something. But I mean, what has he got? 10 touchdowns this year? 11 touchdowns? Like, he's been absolutely killing it. I don't think I can sit him even for Madison in this situation. Both of them, I think, are in consideration for RB2 flex options, though.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree. Wide receivers, got a couple questions here. This is a pick 2, Will, PPR. Van Jefferson versus Jacksonville. Rashad Bateman at Pittsburgh. Tony at Miami, assuming he's playing. I don't think we've really heard anything about that. Jerry Jeudy at Kansas City, and Michael Gallup at New Orleans.
Yeah, I don't think we know much on Tony and with the injury possibly to the quarterback. He's an easy first rollout here. If Amari does miss, I think Gallup is an easy lock in, as you know, even with Lamb coming back, those two in that offense, you know, you're getting the volume. And then it comes down to the three here: Jefferson, Bateman, and Judy. We'll see. I don't know how Pittsburgh's defense is looking. I know they were banged up a couple weeks ago, but I think they're starting to get more healthy. But I do believe TJ Watt went out, so it's tough. Bateman, Judy is one that I had last week. I think we were talking about, and I kind of split the difference there. Neither of them did anything special, but you probably get a little more volume there with Bateman. I think Van Jefferson's probably your big play guy. So if you need, you know, a ton of upside, I'd probably go Jefferson. If you need floor, tough between Bateman and Judy. I maybe lean Judy just because I think Denver's going to have to score some points if they want to keep up with Kansas City. Whereas that Baltimore-Pittsburgh game could be a little more low scoring with the defensives. But, you know, we'll see. I know Lamar had like one of the worst games of his career fantasy-wise last week, so bound to bounce back from that. But I'd probably go Gallup and Jefferson for upside and Judy for like a floor. What about you?
I pretty much agree on all fronts. There's no reason to consider Tony. You know, we had mentioned last week he got like 12 targets and didn't do anything with it. And that's not fair, but he didn't do a ton with it. And then with, you know, his injury, Daniel Jones injury, there's no reason to play that game. So we're going to cross him out. You know, like you, I'm locking in Gallup. You know, if Cooper's out, him and Lamb be a good duo. So that works out pretty well. So I'll lock in Gallup. And then I was really thinking along the same lines. If you need high upside, Van Jefferson's your play. If you don't need high upside, then Bateman and Judy are pretty similar players. They both get a fair amount of volume. Judy has shown more upside this year and has, to me, the more interesting matchup. Like you said, could be a higher scoring. We'll see. You know, those Pittsburgh Raven games always end up being like 13-10. You know, regardless of how the defenses are performing that year, it ends up being low scoring. So I will lock in Gallup and Judy. If you need upside, Gallup and Jefferson.
All right. Next wide receiver here, half point PPR, Devonta Smith at New York or Brandon Ayuk at Seattle.
This is interesting because I looked at it and I thought, wow, it's
easy going into last week, right?
Yeah, like I looked, I was like, I don't know. I'll probably go with Devonta Smith. But then like I started looking into the numbers and Ayuk's actually been a bit more consistent, which is hard to believe given how bad he's been to start the year. But from a fantasy perspective, he's been consistent and how it looks like Debo's out. So I don't think I could pass that up. I guess I'll go with Ayuk. I don't mind either of them. But I think I take Ayuk. If Debo is playing, this might be a different story. Because then, you know, he's sharing the load and Devonta Smith just gets everything. But with Debo out, I think I'll lean that way. What about you? I'm curious.
It's tough. Yeah. I mean, I think especially with Hurts looking really bad, clearly when he doesn't, you know, isn't playing at least decent, it just absolutely submarines Devonta Smith's value. And Brandon Ayuk, I mean, without Debo, you'd imagine he sees an uptick. Maybe just because you'd imagine they're not going to be able to run the ball as well without their, you know, arguably best running back. I mean, Mitchell has been playing really well as well, but both of those two together, they like barely had to throw the ball. They were just so efficient at running. So it's one of those. I still think there's a floor for Smith, and you know, maybe they run the ball a ton, but I think, you know, you're gonna get 4 to 5 catches, 60-ish yards, you know, as long as it's not as bad as last week. Whereas Ayuk, you definitely have a higher ceiling because you just trust Jimmy G a little more on deep passes overall. But, you know, Seattle's defense hasn't been great. So are they able to just run the ball and Ayuk just gets the same volume he's had? I think I lean sticking with Devonta Smith and not trying to overreact on both sides too much. I think there's going to be a big overreaction to Ayuk's value, but I mean, how many passes and targets did we actually see to Debo the last few weeks, right? It was mostly rushing. So I don't think that there's targets to go to him. And I think how bad Jalen Hurts played is really going to scare some people off of Smith as well. So I think there's a lot of kind of instant reaction to this last week on both sides. And I'm going to stick to my guns, and I'm going to stick to Devonta Smith.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving over to the we got tight end one. We don't get these too often. PPR. Logan Thomas finally cracking the start sit episode this year.
Yeah, had him in the waiver episode for a little while there, trying to figure out when he's coming back.
Yeah. Well, he is here, and he is a consideration. So Logan Thomas in his first game back against Vegas, or Foster Moreau taking over for Waller against Washington.
Yeah, and I don't think he's ruled out, but I think all expectations as well are going to miss. But keep an eye, because I don't think they've officially ruled him out yet. They clearly have tight end in the game plan, and we saw that when Waller kind of has a surprise miss against the Eagles. But Foster Moreau played really well, and the Eagles obviously aren't great against the tight end position, so that helps. But they clearly are going to utilize him. I still like the upside of Logan Thomas better. He's clearly the number 2 option on the offense, passing game, outside of some checkdowns that might work their way in. It's McLaurin, and then it's Logan Thomas. And Thomas, you might even see more volume, maybe longer targets to Terry McLaurin. But I think Logan Thomas is a lock for me now. Even coming off the injury, they went to him early and often in that game. So I think you can trust him as a bona fide must-start tight end.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. Not to just rehash the same conversations. Logan Thomas, or a Vegas defense, second worst against a tight end this year. So
there you go.
Tons of opportunity. Morneau, he could, like you said, there's a spot in that offense for a tight end. He could be perfectly fine, but you really want to see it first when you're staring at somebody like Logan Thomas, who you've seen it from and has a great matchup. It's just too hard to pass up.
And then our final start sit question here. PPR, Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus Denver, Van Jefferson versus Jacksonville, and Bateman versus Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so kind of playing off the question from before, I think Jefferson, if you need real high upside, is probably the one with the most upside. He'll catch 2 bombs or 2 touchdowns or something, and that'll be awesome. So he's probably a touchdown play. Outside of needing upside, I can't pass up Edwards-Helaire.
The running back, just getting volume,
Exactly. He looked good on coming back. He's got another, if he was, still banged up at all, he had a bye week to get off, a bye week to prepare for Denver. I would think that all things are looking good for CEH there. So I will take him unless you need real high upside. What about you? You aligned?
Yeah, and then it makes sense. I probably still play Clyde even with the high upside, because I think he's going to get the volume too. I mean, I totally understand, as we said before, Jefferson is one of the big play threats there. He's going to get some deep balls, but I still just think you got to play the volume of the running back on an offense that's playing better, and their defense is surprisingly playing better too. I was looking at them as like a defensive streamer going forward, and they have some okay matchups, but they've been putting up some points defensively, fantasy-wise.
Perfect. So that's going to wrap up the start-sit portion of the show. We'll move over to the trade portion. Might be the last week for redraft trades. We've switched it up. We got 3 Dynasty, 2 redraft, because they are starting to dry up there. But we'll start with those Dynasty questions. A big one to start here, 16-team PPR. Christian McCaffrey, Chuba, and Michael Carter. Or Antonio Gibson, Ronald Jones, and Mike Williams.
That's interesting. I think I lean pretty easily the McCaffrey side, and I think it's the Carter part. Rojo, probably maybe a little bit more upside than Chuba, but not a ton. And Chuba's kind of that insurance for post CMC life. But I think you have some injury concern there. But going into obviously this year, you're probably taking the Gibson side with the injuries. Carter could come back and give you something. And Chuba, you're probably, unless you're like an absolute, bona fide contender and top 2 or 3. I guess I'm caught here looking a little too far down the road, but I like that CMC Carter side. really just giving up Gibson and trying to capitalize on the Mike Williams breakout that happened and kind of bouncing back and forth the last few weeks. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're a top contender, you kind of have to go with the Gibson side just to get some guys that are going to play now, because Chuba doesn't have a great schedule. But I like that Carter and Carolina running back side.
Yeah, I'm with you. Right down to like the problem. If you take out Carter and Ronald Jones out of this, I think it becomes a much more even trade. And I'd probably even rather want the Gibson side in all situations. But Carter in there changes a lot. He's a young running back that's looked good and has a lot of young pieces on the offense, so it could be interesting. As a contender, I'd rather have CMC because the valuation doesn't seem right. If this is the only thing that you can get, then so be it. But I'd definitely be exploring other options before I accept.
Yeah, I think you can get more than this for Clyde plus. I mean, for CMC plus. It's just weird that you'd have to give up a young running back and CMC.
Yeah, that hurts. Yeah, it's a lot of running back depth to give up.
Yeah, maybe you have, two stars already and you're getting Gibson as like your third and you can go from there, team dependent, obviously, but in a vacuum, I think there's not many situations where I don't take the CMC side.
Fair. Going right back to a running back question here, 10-team standard. Would you rather have Zeke or a 2022 first and a 2023 first? So 2 firsts for Zeke, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's decent valuation. Maybe you can get a little bit more for him, but 2 first-round picks is pretty good. We'll have to see where they end up. You kind of hope that at least one of them is going to be higher because obviously you can hit on anywhere, but you're usually going to get that top-end running back in the first half of a draft. So you'd want to have a young running back and a pick. See if you could turn this instead. Drop one of the first and get like a Dobbins or somebody that's injured. Cam Akers or something. I'd rather have somebody that I've seen do it, but coming off injury and this contending team can't use in a first. So I'd probably look for a little bit more. And in this here, I'll probably take the Zeke side. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair. If I'm a contender, I'll take Zeke. If I'm a rebuild, I'll take the first. I think that's what it comes down to. I am worried as a contender about taking Zeke, given they would talk about him being banged up. He could sit this week, and if that's no big deal, like you're locked in the playoffs, and that's fine. But they, like I said earlier, he could be playing this week, in which case maybe he gets banged up even worse. And, now instead of resting for 1 week, he's out for 2 or 3 and he's starting to hurt you a little bit, So you're rolling the dice, but I think that's how I see it. Contender Zeke, rebuild first.
All right. And another dynasty here, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So you got the Green Bay backfield, or J.K. Dobbins and Devonta Smith.
This one, I think... This is a pretty interesting one. I think I would take the Dobbins side, which kind of surprises me. You're hoping he comes back from the injury and everything's fine. They don't replace him or, any of that. But Devonta Smith's a great piece to be getting in Dynasty. He looks legit. He's had a lot of good weeks. Hopefully him and Jalen Hurts grow together or, they go out and get another quarterback that's good. But I'd really like to add both of them. Meanwhile, Aaron Jones, solid. You would assume maybe coming, I don't want to say coming to the end of his career, but he's a questionable future. A.J. Dillon's look good. You don't know where Aaron Rodgers is going to go. You got a handcuff situation, so you're probably only going to play one on any given week. So I'll stick with the Dobbins side. I don't mind the Aaron Jones side, but just more interested in the other players. What about you?
Yeah, I think what Dillon has done the past couple of weeks has made this a more interesting trade. You see him and he's looked okay, but then the last few weeks he's really looked the part. He looked legit. His run, last week I think he had 20 for 70 or something. A couple catches, on the stat line didn't look great, but if you watch him play, he runs with purpose. He was getting hit early and breaking tackles and running through guys, so he looks the part. And, you're a little worried in Dynasty picking up Aaron Jones moving forward, but having both of them helps. That being said, I agree. Devonta Smith has looked really good as a young, promising receiver. and you get a Dobbins who, I believe that was preseason that he got hurt, right?
Yeah.
So you hope in all likelihood that he's going to be back, fully next year. I like that as a rebuilding team. I mean, if you're a contender, it doesn't really make sense to make this trade for Dobbins and Devonta Smith unless you have, a ton of RB depth and you're just looking to get, Dobbins, pretty much using him as like a pick and then, getting a good young receiver. But I don't mind it. I guess one thing I'd say, you can kind of sub this out, Steve. Would you trade Dobbins and Elijah Moore for Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon if this was something in our in our dynasty league that we were looking at?
No, I don't think I would. I think I'd rather have Dobbins than Elijah Moore. Just because we've seen some good things from Elijah Moore,
Yeah, he's looked good. And that's, obviously I think Devonta Smith looked a little bit better, but both of them have flashed and, they're guys that you hope that you hit on and you can really build around.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess I don't mind it.
Getting that running back though, it's because that's where we're at. Like we are a true contender in a very tough division. So getting that third elite running back this year, that's kind of the price you got to pay, right?
In our situation, we're trading two people that were not starting. Clearly not starting Dobbins, but two people were not starting for, pretty much a guaranteed starter, whether it's Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon. Unless they both go down, you're starting one of them. So, yeah, I guess that would work out well for us. There's a lot of hesitation in moving Elijah Moore for us because he's a key piece moving forward that allows us to move a Mike Evans or Keenan Allen and just plop him in there if he continues to ascend. So, yeah, it's an interesting thought. It's pretty even. I think I lean the Dobbins side, but, yeah, it's interesting.
All right. And then we've got two redraft trades here. We got half-point PPR, Joe Mixon and Brandon Ayuk, or Jonathan Taylor and Devonta Smith. Caveat, Taylor and Smith do have buys coming up in week 14, so you get them for the stretch run here, but you do lose them, not this coming week, but both of them next week.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up as well. I think that's really the differentiator. If you're locked in a playoff spot, then I'll take Jonathan Taylor and Devonta Smith because I like both their playoff matchups, and they're both great players. If not, your priority's got to be making the playoffs. Maybe you look ahead and look at your schedule and say, well, given who I'm playing and who they got on bye, I could probably squeak by. You want to roll the dice, that's fine. But you need to get in the playoffs first. So, if I'm in that kind of situation, I'll take Mixon and Ayuk, but I definitely prefer JT and Devonta there. What about you? You agree?
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement there. Like, unless you are really contending and need to win every week, even so, I mean, man, I don't know that I want to, trade away Taylor. Mixon has been great. Taylor's been so good that he's, kind of dwarfed the hype for Mixon because he has really been so good and so consistent this year. But I just can't trade. You're basically kind of downgrading, a little bit Taylor to Mixon, probably not a ton, and then maybe a little bit more Smith versus Ayuk. I know we talked about that as a heads up in the start or sit portion of the show here, but I think it is still a little bit of a downgrade from just a volume standpoint. So you kind of downgrade both of those to get both of them in your lineup the rest of the way. If you're competing and you really need it, I get why you'd make the trade, but I think I'd rather have Taylor and Smith.
Okay, our last question here, PPR. Tyler Lockett and Tony Pollard or Deebo Samuel?
Man, without knowing the full Deebo news, you have any insights there with your beat reporters there in San Francisco?
The hope of that is that he's back next week. Now,
okay.
I mean, they also ruled him out for this week almost immediately, which is not a great sign. But the hope is next week.
Yeah, and man, if it looks like he is going to be able to play for your fantasy playoffs, right? I mean, you're going to miss him here in week 13 and then probably in week 14, which is some people's playoffs. I think most of us are going to be doing 15, 16, 17, but I do have two leagues that are starting week 14. I believe, they didn't realize it has changed. So you got to, worry about that. If you do need to win these next 2 weeks to get in, or you need to win and, I guess Lockett and Pollard maybe just doesn't seem like enough. They both are going to be in your lineup this week, which is better than Deebo's going to get you, but I feel like you could almost get more, with Russ still trying to get back to form. Lockett's value isn't back to where it was, and Pollard's more of like speculative with the Zeke potential sitting injury. So I think it's a little too much uncertainty on that side. I think I got to keep Debo, even if I need to win. I think I got to keep Debo.
So I agree. This is a tough one. I do think you'd be surprised about Pollard. The last 3 weeks, he's definitely been fantasy usable, if not good. So it might just end up one of those team dependent decisions where, if you're staring down a playoff run and you have Debo and you need to plug a hole for in the running back position, I'd be okay downgrading the Lockett to get Pollard. Lockett's been good since, outside the first week that Russ came back, the last 2 weeks, Lockett's been good. So that's solid. And then on the flip side, if you got a lot of depth and you want to, package them together to get like the elite upside that is Debo, I'm good with that too. Just know the risk. Debo's got long injury history, and groin injuries have a habit of re-aggravating if you come back too soon. So there's a lot of worry there. From me, taking the situation out of it, I do think I'd probably end up going the Lockett side just because of that injury history with Debo, because it's a groin, because he's ruled out so quickly. That all worries me. If Russ was performing poorly and Lockett was performing poorly as well, I'd probably change my mind. But because Lockett's been pretty good for fans, he hasn't been like the best wide receiver in the world or anything, but he's been solid double digits the past 2 weeks. If that wasn't happening, I'd probably be less confident, but I will stick with the Lockett side. It's even though it's a good trade.
All right. Well, that wraps us up here for start sits and trade. So good luck everyone here in week 13, which is possibly the last regular season week for some people, second to last here for most. So coming in to the stretch, keep an eye on those matchups. Grab those defenses that are a week or two out here now. And get yourself ready for playoffs if you're in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Will said, good luck, and tune in next week for another waiver and start sit episode. Until then, trust your board.